You don't catch betrayal by catching someone in the act. You feel it long before you can explain it. The distance, the silence, the way something no longer fits. And once you see these signs, you can't unsee them. There's a moment most men remember clearly, even if they don't talk about it. It's not a fight. It's not a confession. It's not even a clear sign. It's a feeling, a quiet sense that something isn't lining up anymore. She's still there. She still laughs. She still answers your texts. From the outside, nothing looks broken, but inside, something feels disconnected. Like you're standing next to someone who isn't fully present with you anymore. That feeling doesn't come from nowhere. Most men try to ignore it. They tell themselves they're overthinking. They blame stress, work, routine, time. They convince themselves this is just what long-term relationships feel like. But deep down, you know the truth. When something changes at the core, your body notices before your mind is ready to accept it. The cruel part isn't being lied to. The cruel part is sensing the lie while pretending everything is fine. You start replaying small moments in your head, a look that didn't last as long, a touch that felt distant, a silence where warmth used to live. None of it is dramatic on its own. That's why it's so easy to dismiss, and that's exactly how men end up betraying themselves. Because women rarely sit you down and tell you they crossed a line, but they almost always reveal it without realizing they're doing it. Through energy, through behavior, through subtle shifts that don't match who they were with you before. The mistake most men make is waiting for proof. They think betrayal announces itself loudly. They think it comes with obvious signs, clear evidence, or a moment where everything finally makes sense. But real betrayal is quiet. It slips into the relationship slowly. It doesn't destroy things all at once. It changes the atmosphere, and if you're not paying attention, you'll keep adjusting yourself to a reality that's no longer real. You start lowering expectations. You start asking for less. You start explaining away things that used to matter to you. And every time you do that, you move further away from your own self-respect. Here's the truth most men don't want to hear. When a woman has recently given herself to someone else, she doesn't return the same way she left. Something always shifts. Not because she wants it to, but because the human mind and body don't know how to fully hide emotional and physical displacement. You feel it in the air before you see it in her actions. That's why this video matters. Not to turn you into a paranoid observer, not to make you suspicious of every small change, but to help you recognize patterns instead of excuses. Because patterns don't lie. People do, and if you don't learn to recognize those patterns, you'll keep pouring energy into a relationship where the connection has already started leaking out. Most men don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they're loyal to an illusion. They stay committed to the version of her that no longer exists. They hold on to memories instead of responding to reality. And by the time the truth becomes undeniable, their confidence is already damaged. This is where awareness changes everything. Once you understand how betrayal actually reveals itself, you stop chasing reassurance. You stop begging for closeness. You stop explaining away disrespect. You start observing. You start trusting what your instincts have been trying to tell you all along. Because your intuition isn't random. It's your subconscious picking up on inconsistencies your conscious mind hasn't accepted yet. And no matter how careful someone thinks they're being, they can't hide everything. Their body leaks the truth. Their emotions give them away. Their habits shift in ways they can't fully control. The only real question is whether you'll notice early or explain it away until it costs you your dignity. In the next sections, we're going to break down the exact signs that tend to appear when a woman has recently slept with someone else. Not theories, not internet rumors, real behavioral and psychological shifts that repeat themselves over and over. Some of these signs are subtle, some are uncomfortable, and one of them is almost impossible to fake for long. But before we go any further, understand this: you don't need to catch anyone, you don't need to interrogate, you don't need to accuse, you just need clarity. Because the moment you stop lying to yourself is the moment you take your power back. And once you see what's really happening, you'll never look at silence, distance, or sudden changes the same way again. When her body and routines stop matching the past, people can control their words, they can rehearse explanations, they can lie calmly if they've practiced long enough. But the body doesn't play along that easily. It reacts first, it remembers, it adjusts in ways the mind can't fully manage. And when a woman has recently been intimate with someone else, Her body and daily routines often shift before her story ever does. That's why this section matters. Not because every change means betrayal, but because sudden, unexplained changes matter when they break a long-standing pattern. If you've been with a woman long enough, you know her rhythm. You know how she normally touches you. You know how she usually moves through her day. You know what feels normal and what doesn't. So when something changes and stays changed, your instincts notice immediately. One of the first places this shows up is physical closeness. She may still sit next to you, but the space between you feels wider. Her touch feels lighter, shorter, almost cautious. Hugs end quicker, kisses lose weight. It's not rejection, but it's not desire either. It feels neutral, and neutrality is dangerous in a relationship. At first you try to explain it away. You tell yourself she's tired, distracted, busy, but what you're really reacting to is a shift in energy. The body knows when its attention has been redirected. When intimacy has been spent elsewhere, it rarely comes back overflowing. Another place this shows up is in routines around cleanliness and appearance. Suddenly, she showers the moment she gets home, or she changes clothes immediately, even when there's no clear reason. A new scent appears out of nowhere, a perfume she didn't wear before, a level of freshness that feels out of place given the day she just had. On the surface, it looks like self-care, but psychologically, this kind of behavior often comes from a need to reset, to erase, to separate moments, not just physically, but mentally. The mistake men make is looking at these behaviors individually. One shower doesn't mean anything. One outfit change doesn't mean anything. One new scent doesn't mean anything. But repetition does. Patterns do, especially when these changes line up with unexplained absences, emotional distance, or sudden mood swings. Another subtle shift happens in how she guards her space. Her phone stays face down more often. Her personal items feel slightly off limits. She becomes private in ways she never was before, even if she insists nothing has changed. This isn't about secrecy alone, it's about mental separation. When someone has one foot outside the relationship, they start protecting that space without realizing it. Their body language tightens, their openness narrows, their sense of shared access fades. And here's the part most men struggle with. You don't want to believe it. You want to be the reasonable one, the calm one, the trusting one. So you dismiss what your senses are picking up. You tell yourself you're imagining things. You convince yourself that questioning these shifts would make you insecure. But insecurity isn't noticing change. Insecurity is ignoring change because you're afraid of what it might mean. Your intuition isn't built on paranoia. It's built on familiarity, on knowing what used to be consistent and recognizing when consistency breaks. And when you ignore that, you don't protect the relationship. You weaken yourself inside it. So what's the right move here? Not confrontation, not accusation, not surveillance, observation. You pull back slightly, you stop over-initiating physical closeness, you stop forcing connection, and you watch what happens. A woman who still desires you will feel the distance and close it naturally, without being asked, without being pressured. A woman who has emotionally or physically disconnected will let the space remain, or even expand. That response tells you more than any argument ever could. Another important point men miss is this. When you sense these changes, don't try to compensate by trying harder. Don't become more affectionate to fill the gap. Don't increase effort to win her back. Desire doesn't respond to pressure. Connection doesn't grow from overinvestment. Trying harder when the bond has shifted only trains her to take more while giving less. Awareness, on the other hand, restores balance. It keeps you grounded. It stops you from chasing warmth that isn't there anymore, and it allows you to see reality clearly, instead of emotionally negotiating with yourself, because once her body and routines no longer align with the past, something has already moved inside her, and if you miss it here, it won't disappear. It will show up next in her emotions, in her tone, in her irritation, in the way guilt starts looking for somewhere else to land, and that's where things start getting louder. When guilt turns into anger and false warmth. When guilt sits quietly, it feels unbearable. So most people don't sit with it for long. They redirect it, they disguise it, they release it in ways that don't expose the real cause. And when a woman has crossed a line, guilt often leaks out in two opposite directions, irritation or sudden affection. Both can mean the same thing. This is where many men get confused. One day she's cold, snapping over small things. The next day she's warm, affectionate, almost overly kind, and because you want peace, you accept both without questioning the source. But emotionally, neither is random. Let's start with the anger. You walk into the room and she's already irritated. Nothing happened, but something feels off. The way you speak annoys her. The way you move bothers her. The smallest things turn into problems. You didn't text enough. You said something wrong. You're suddenly not the same anymore. What's really happening is internal pressure. Guilt needs somewhere to go, and if she can place that discomfort on you, she doesn't have to sit with it herself. Psychologically, this is projection. If she can frame you as the problem, she becomes the justified one. In her mind, the story shifts. She didn't step outside the relationship because she wanted to. She did it because something was missing, because you weren't present enough, because she felt neglected. That story helps her sleep at night. The danger for you is how easy it is to fall into the trap. You start defending yourself, explaining, apologizing. You think if you just communicate better, the tension will fade, but you can't argue someone out of guilt. Every explanation you give becomes fuel. The more you defend, the more she convinces herself that her frustration is justified. Before long, you're walking on eggshells in your own relationship. Now let's talk about the opposite reaction: sudden warmth. This one is even more dangerous because it feels good. After distance, after silence, after tension, she suddenly softens. She touches you more. She hugs you longer. She says the right things. She looks at you with emotion in her eyes, and your mind relaxes. You think, maybe I was wrong. Maybe things are getting better. But here's the hard truth. Not all affection comes from desire. Some of it comes from guilt management. After crossing a line, some women don't pull away, they pull closer. Not because they're reconnecting with you, but because they're trying to reconnect with who they think they are. That affection isn't about bonding, it's about relief. Touching you helps quiet the voice inside her that says she did something wrong. Being kind helps her feel like a good person again. Saying I love you becomes a way to convince herself more than you. The mistake men make is rewarding this behavior. You lean in, you drop your guard, you accept the affection without questioning why it arrived now. After distance, after silence, after inconsistency. And in doing that, you become the emotional safety net. You're not being loved, you're being used as comfort. So how do you tell the difference? Consistency. Real affection doesn't arrive in waves. It doesn't appear only after tension. It doesn't vanish the moment things feel stable again. Guilt-driven affection is intense but short-lived. It comes and goes depending on how heavy her conscience feels. And your body knows the difference. Genuine desire feels grounded, calm, present. Guilt-driven affection feels urgent, emotional, almost apologetic. Another sign is eye contact. When affection is real, her eyes are with you. When it's guilt, her eyes search for reassurance. They're looking for something to ease discomfort, not deepen connection. So what should you do when you notice this pattern? You don't reject her. You don't accuse her. You don't get emotional. You slow everything down. You stop reacting to mood swings. You stop chasing affection when it appears. You receive it calmly without leaning into it emotionally. That neutrality is powerful. It prevents you from becoming the place where guilt gets unloaded. It keeps you from mistaking emotional confusion for genuine connection. And most importantly, it keeps you grounded in self-respect. Because love doesn't need emotional extremes to survive. Real connection doesn't swing between irritation and intensity. When you notice these emotional shifts, anger without cause, warmth without consistency, it's a sign something underneath hasn't been resolved. And unresolved guilt never stays contained. If it can't escape through emotion, it will leak somewhere else, into detachment, into absence, into a presence that feels hollow, even when she's right next to you. And that's where the next shift becomes impossible to ignore. Presence without connection. There's a difference most men don't notice at first. The difference between a woman being next to you and a woman being with you. On the surface, everything looks normal. She's there, she responds, she participates. If someone else walked into the room, they wouldn't see a problem. But you feel it. Something is missing. Her body is present, but her attention isn't anchored. Her energy doesn't sync with yours the way it used to. Conversations feel thinner. Silence feels heavier. And the hardest part is this. You can't point to one clear reason why. This kind of disconnection doesn't arrive dramatically. It settles in quietly. You notice it during small moments. When you're talking and her eyes drift. when she answers but doesn't engage, when her reactions feel delayed, almost automatic. You're not arguing, you're not fighting, you're just not connecting. This is emotional absence, and it's one of the clearest signs that her attachment has shifted elsewhere. During intimacy, this absence becomes even more obvious. She might still touch you, she might still participate, but it feels mechanical, like she's following a script instead of sharing a moment. Her body moves, but her energy feels distant. Her eyes don't linger, her breathing doesn't sync. It's as if she's somewhere else mentally, replaying something that doesn't include you. That's not intimacy, that's performance. And performance is what happens when someone feels obligated, not connected. Most men try to fix this the wrong way. They try harder, more affection, more patience, more effort. They think if they show up more fully, she'll meet them there. But emotional absence doesn't respond to effort, it responds to truth. If her emotional focus has already shifted, no amount of trying will pull it back. In fact, trying harder often pushes it further away, because effort without reciprocity feels like pressure. Here's the part that hurts to accept. When a woman is emotionally present with someone else, she can't fully be present with you. Emotional energy doesn't split cleanly, it redirects. That's why you feel like you're sharing space with a version of her that's thinner, quieter, less alive. The mistake men make is confusing physical participation with emotional availability. Just because she's there doesn't mean she's with you. Just because she hasn't left doesn't mean she hasn't moved on internally. And when you ignore that difference, you start negotiating your own needs. You accept half conversations. You accept distracted affection. You accept intimacy that leaves you feeling emptier than before. That's not compromise, that's self-erasure. So what's the right response? You stop chasing presence. You don't demand connection. You don't ask her to explain herself. You don't try to recreate what used to be. Instead, you pull your energy back. You become quieter, more observant, more grounded, not cold, not angry, just centered. And then you watch. Does she notice the distance and move toward you emotionally? Does she initiate real conversation? Does she re-engage without being prompted? Or does she remain where she is, comfortable with the gap? That answer tells you everything. Another sign of emotional absence is how she responds to your vulnerability. When you open up, does she lean in or shut down? Does she listen or redirect? Does she offer presence or distraction? A woman who is emotionally invested makes space for your inner world. A woman who is checked out avoids it, even subtly. She might change the subject, she might minimize, she might offer surface-level comfort without depth. And again, it's not loud, it's quiet, which makes it easy to ignore. But emotional absence doesn't stay hidden forever. If you continue accepting it, it turns into routine, and routine turns into resentment. And resentment slowly dissolves respect for both of you. That's why awareness here is crucial. Not to confront, not to accuse, but to decide. You don't need to force connection from someone who isn't available. You need to recognize when availability is gone, because staying in a relationship where you feel alone is more damaging than being alone. And if she's emotionally absent now, the next shift is almost inevitable, because when emotional connection fades, time starts moving away too. She won't just feel distant when she's with you, she'll start being distant by not being there at all. Time, distance, and the cracks in her story. Time tells the truth when words can't. A woman who is emotionally invested will always make her way back to you, even on busy days, even when life is chaotic, even when things aren't perfect. But when her attachment shifts, time becomes the first thing she takes away. She starts coming home later, she's suddenly unavailable more often. Plans change, calls get shorter, replies slow down. At first it feels harmless. Work ran long, her phone died, something came up at the last minute, and any one of those excuses could be real. The problem isn't the excuse, the problem is the pattern. When lateness becomes normal, it's no longer about circumstance, it's about priority. And priority doesn't lie. Most men sense this shift immediately, but they hesitate to respond. They don't want to seem controlling, they don't want to push her away, so they stay quiet and hope things correct themselves. But silence here doesn't create peace, it creates permission. Every time you accept distance without acknowledgement, you teach her something. You teach her that your time is flexible, that your expectations are negotiable, that your boundaries don't hold weight, and slowly respect erodes. Another key sign appears in how her explanations change. At first her stories sound reasonable, then over time they start to thin out. Details don't line up the same way. Timelines shift. What she said last week doesn't match what she says today. You don't catch her in a clear lie. You catch her in inconsistency. And inconsistency is where truth leaks out. People telling the truth don't have to manage details. People hiding something do. And the more often someone has to explain themselves, the harder it becomes to keep the story straight. You notice hesitation. You notice over-explaining. You notice defensiveness when the question is simple. And again, you tell yourself you're imagining things, but your gut tightens every time. That's your internal alarm responding to contradiction. Another overlooked sign is how she reacts when you don't accept the explanation immediately. A woman who has nothing to hide stays calm. She understands curiosity. She answers without tension. A woman protecting something reacts differently. She gets irritated. She accuses you of not trusting her. She flips the conversation onto you. Why are you questioning me? Why are you acting insecure? Why is this such a big deal? This isn't about the question. It's about pressure. Because when the story is fragile, even gentle scrutiny feels threatening. The mistake men make at this stage is turning into detectives. They ask more questions. They analyze timelines. They look for proof. They think clarity will come from information. But clarity doesn't come from interrogation. It comes from observation. You don't need to know exactly where she was. You need to know how consistently she shows up for you. Because love doesn't disappear quietly. It withdraws in pieces. Time is one of those pieces, and when you stop receiving it, something else has already taken its place. So what's the right response here? You don't argue about details. You don't demand explanations. You don't chase reassurance. You acknowledge reality. That might look like calm statements instead of questions. You weren't here. You didn't show up. That matters to me. And then you stop filling the silence. Silence is powerful when used correctly. It forces responsibility back onto the person avoiding it. It stops you from doing emotional labor for someone who isn't reciprocating. Another important shift happens when you stop rearranging your life to accommodate inconsistency. You stop waiting. You stop canceling your plans. You stop putting yourself on pause. That's not punishment. That's self-respect. Because a woman who values you will notice when access to you changes. She'll feel the difference. She'll respond. And if she doesn't, that's information too. Here's the truth many men avoid. You don't need certainty to set boundaries. You don't need proof to protect your dignity. You only need consistency. When her time, her presence, and her explanations no longer align, the story is already breaking apart. And when a story starts collapsing, it doesn't fix itself. It either gets exposed, or you stop believing it. And that moment, the moment you stop needing things to make sense, is where your power returns. Because the final sign doesn't come from time or distance. It comes when the narrative itself can no longer hold together. The moment you choose clarity over comfort. At some point, the story stops working. Not because she admits anything, not because you uncover proof, but because your mind can no longer hold the contradictions without breaking. Her words don't line up with her behavior. Her explanations don't calm your instincts. Her presence doesn't feel real anymore, and suddenly, something inside you goes quiet. That's the moment most men misunderstand. They think confusion means they need more answers, more conversations, more effort, more patience. But confusion is often clarity knocking softly. It's your mind realizing that the version of reality you've been holding onto no longer exists. This is the final sign when the narrative collapses. She forgets what she told you before. Details change depending on the day. Her tone shifts when you don't react the way she expects. You're not catching lies, you're watching a story lose stability. And here's the part that matters most. You don't need to expose anything. You don't need to confront aggressively. You don't need to win an argument. You just need to stop pretending you believe what no longer feels true. The most powerful moment in this entire process isn't when she confesses. It's when you quietly decide you're done negotiating with your own intuition. Men often ask, should I confront her? The better question is, what do I gain by pretending not to see? Because once trust is replaced by doubt, the relationship has already changed, and dragging it forward on borrowed belief only drains you further. Here's what choosing clarity looks like. You stop asking questions that have no satisfying answers. You stop reacting emotionally to every inconsistency. You stop explaining your boundaries. You become calm. Calm doesn't mean weak. Calm means resolved. You understand that love without respect is a slow form of self-destruction, and you refuse to participate in that. This is where men reclaim themselves, not through anger, not through revenge, but through quiet self-respect. You realize something important. The greatest betrayal wasn't what she may or may not have done. It was how long you ignored what your instincts were trying to protect. Because instincts exist to keep you aligned with reality, not to torture you. And once you accept that, everything shifts. You no longer need certainty. You no longer need closure. You no longer need her to explain herself. You only need alignment between your values and your actions. If there's room to repair, real repair, it happens through honesty, accountability, and consistent effort on both sides. But if patterns remain, if distance continues, if clarity never arrives, then walking away isn't failure, it's graduation. It's choosing dignity over attachment, self-respect over comfort, reality over hope, and that choice changes how you move through every relationship after. You stop over-investing, you stop ignoring red flags, you stop shrinking yourself to keep someone close. You become a man who trusts himself, and that trust is powerful, because when you trust yourself, you don't fear loss, you don't fear loneliness, you don't fear starting over, you fear staying where you're no longer respected. So if you recognized yourself in any part of this video, don't panic. Awareness isn't destruction, it's correction. You're not here to accuse, you're not here to chase, you're here to choose. Choose whether the relationship in front of you matches the standards you hold for your life. Choose whether silence is peace or avoidance. Choose whether staying is love or fear. Because the moment you stop lying to yourself, everything becomes simpler. Hard but simple, and simple truth always beats complicated denial. If this video helped you see something more clearly, share it with someone who might still be stuck explaining away what they feel. And remember this, you don't need to catch anyone doing wrong to walk away. You just need to respect yourself enough to stop accepting less than you deserve. That's not bitterness, that's strength. And once you choose that, no one ever gets to quietly take your dignity again.